Okay, I think we should now be live if everything is working. Okay, great. So I'll wait just a little bit to see, wait for some people to join, but welcome to another live stream. I have had OBS crash on me a couple of times whilst I was prepping for this. So if I suddenly disappear or freeze, I will be back on shortly, but hopefully that shouldn't happen. Yeah, so welcome. What we're going to be covering today is Pitchbend. So if you may or may not have seen, we had a video come out recently with artist Piripa, who was basically exploring Pitchbend, kind of explaining what it was with some examples. We had some really good responses from that, and we had some questions that people had. So we thought it was a good opportunity to talk about Pitchbend on a live stream. I'll basically cover the same examples or the same kind of tips that Piripa went through in the video, but this would be now a chance to us to explore it a little bit more in depth with some explanations, but also if anyone has any questions, then they can answer them as well, or I can answer them as well. So as always, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat as we go, so if anything pops up or something you want to see, doesn't even have to be related to Pitchbend. If there's something that you want to see, then yeah, feel free to just drop it in the chat and I'll keep an eye out. There is also other people in the chat as well who can answer any questions if I can't answer them now on stream. But yes, so Pitchbend. Let's start with, I guess, a brief explanation about Pitchbend. Let's change my window over first. Again, as always, if you can't hear audio, something goes wrong, just let me know in the chat and I'll try and amend it quickly. Move all these windows around. Okay, cool. Let's put this back to here. So Pitchbend. So what is Pitchbend? Pitchbend is basically a way to bend notes using a pitch bend wheel, normally on a MIDI keyboard, or with Dubler using your voice. So what do you mean by bend? So bend is when you start a note and then you can sort of glide up or down a set range, which is decided by the pitch bend range. So on a traditional MIDI keyboard, so I've got a MIDI keyboard that I don't think you can probably see down here, but let me just arm this. So if I hit a note on the keyboard, if I put this input to all ins, yep, so I've got just single notes playing like that. But if I move the pitch bend wheel, then I can glide up or down. So you get that bendy wobbly sound. So this is traditionally done on a keyboard with that wheel. It's close to the mid wheel on the left hand side, and you can just go up or down, which is fun. But we can also do that with the voice in Dubler. So let me put this back to Dubler. So with Pitchbend, oh, well, let me turn it off first. So Pitchbend is in the bottom left here. But with Pitchbend off, Dubler basically works like a keyboard where every time you hit a note or move up to a note, it starts a new onset. And so if you kind of went ooh with Pitchbend off, all you're going to get is all the notes in the scale you're in, just starting new, and it would be the same as if you hit your finger on a keyboard and just dragged it up. You just get like a da 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 da. So I get ooh. So you hear it's just going boo 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 because it's going round and just hitting a new note every time I go past it. So pitch bend range allows you to actually bend. So when I hit that start note, I can go ooh, and it will actually glide with that instead of just hitting a new note with every one that goes past. So if I turn pitch bend on in the bottom left here, now I can go ooh. So you hear that's now gliding rather than going do 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 and hitting. So with that off again, ooh. With it on, ooh. It's some extra notes there. So that's what pitch bend is doing basically. It's allowing you to bend from a start note that you hit by a set amount. So a kind of, a lot of people would have seen, if you'd watched our previous streams or you've watched some of our tips and tricks, one big thing that we always emphasize is that when you're singing a melody, you use kind of percussive notes and you make sure you separate them clearly. And this is because with pitch bend off, you get those hits. So we try to say to not glide between notes. If you've got a melody that's 3 notes, don't go go like da da da. So you hit those 3 notes clearly. But with pitch bend on, we can ignore that and we can actually do these glides. And you can also do humming. So things like is not going to get you particularly clean MIDI information, but with pitch bend, we can get those hummed kind of like So kind of with pitch bend, we can start to find a different way to input melodies and we get a different sound back with that. We'll show some examples in just a second as well. Let me know, is the audio okay? Can you hear that? It sounds a little bit quiet to me, but I'll leave it as it is. With pitch bend, so let's just talk about pitch bend range quickly as well. So pitch bend range basically means the range of how high or low you can go from that initial note that you hit to start with. So if I start with a da, that's a B, da, that's basically, it's showing me how far I can bend from that B before it's going to hit a new note. So you can see I have it set to 12 here, and 12 means 12 steps. So if you know about theory, that's basically a semitone. So 12 steps is in full octave. So that means it's not going to hit any new notes apart from a B. But if I change this to say 5 steps, if I bend 5 notes away from a B, then I can hit a new note start, if that makes sense. And something that's really, really important is that the pitch bend range in Dubler, which is this number here, has to match the pitch bend range in the plugin that you're using. So this changes for every plugin. Everyone does it different. To find out how to do it, just search pitch bend range, Google pitch bend range, and then the name of the plugin you're using. I'm in Ableton right now with Operator. If I click on here, it says pitch and you see the +12. So this is the pitch bend range. So if I put this to 5 and this to 5, then now if I bend up or down, it's basically going to hit a new note when I go past 5 steps. Da. So you see when it hit the F, the new note started, and that was a new anchor from where I can bend from. So the reason or how you could do that is basically meant that if I had it for just 2 steps, I could bend just a little bit and still sing quite like staccato style melodies. Da, 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 da. So a little bit silly there, but it's basically allowing you to set how far you want to go before you're going to hit that new note. So I'm going to keep it on an octave for most of this because that normally allows you to really show and hear how much we're bending. So yeah, just things with pitch bend to keep in mind is to make sure the pitch bend range matches. If it doesn't match, it will still work. It will just sound weird, or it sound like it's not matching the pitch. If I had 1 to 5 and 1 to 12, for example, it's not going to feel like it's working properly. So if you do ever hear that when using pitch bend, you're like, that's not following the pitch of my voice, just double check that that number matches in both, else you'll get some strange kind of pitchings. So I guess before we go into examples, let's also talk about stickiness as well in the play tab, which is not something we mentioned in that video. So stickiness in the top right hand side of the play tab here. Without pitch bend, what this refers to is how sticky you are to a particular note. So that means when I'm hitting a note, if the stickiness is really high, you have to make it really obvious to Dubler that you're moving to the next note before it will hit. So this gives you some really clean, consistent MIDI, but it's like less responsive. If the stickiness is really low, then it will move, if you vary from a note, it will move really easily, which is great for really quick and responsive melodies, but it's going to give you quite a lot of notes and there's a higher chance you'll get some messy MIDI information. So you normally with stickiness you find the right balance for that and find what's best for you. For pitch bend, it does a similar thing but plays a slightly different role in the actual bending of the note. So just to explain, if you go in the Assign tab, you'll see we have what's called bend response. So these are two different types of pitch bend. One is IntelliBend and one is true bend. So true bend is the actual pitch of your voice. It's called true bend because it's closely and is actually giving you exactly what you're singing. True bend can be good if you're experimenting with maybe using an instrument plug in, or you're really strung with your voice. Then it's going to give you like a really accurate representation of the pitch bend. For a lot of people like me, if your voice is rubbish, then true bend sometimes sounds a bit silly. You get like really wobbly notes. If I kind of go like, ooh, you can hear that vibrato because I naturally have a low voice. I'm kind of go, ooh. So I'm getting those wobbles. Ooh. So what we've done to help with that is use IntelliBend. So IntelliBend basically takes an average and smooths it out, basically. So now if we do the same thing with IntelliBend, you can hear it's a lot more stable, basically. So that's what IntelliBend's doing. And the stickiness is how you can play with how smooth or the response of the bend, if that makes sense, IntelliBend. So if it's really high, then they'll get it really smooth. It may not be super responsive though, so it's not going to be maybe as low latency. So it's very smooth, but it's not moving around a lot. If I have it all the way down, I'm going to get these wobbles and I can get a really accurate kind of closer thing to my voice. So have a play around with that. It doesn't make, it's one of those things where if you're just using IntelliBend, I'd probably just keep it where it is by default and see how the response is and how you feel. But that's just worth bearing in mind. So stickiness will also play a part with Pitchbend. And the key lock as well, which is always really important, just in general with Dubler, to make sure you're in the right key. So let's take a look at some examples then. So what I'm using here for these examples is just a basic sine key, so you can sort of really hear it. It's kind of quite high pitched, and so it's clear what's going on in the bend. So let's first play with some backing kind of piano and vocals. I've made a very smooth and slightly little cheesy backing track for you all to enjoy. So here it is. So I've got just a backing track here, which is in D sharp minor, which you can see here. So I've also got Dubler in D sharp minor. Let's put it in the pentatonic of that. And I've got my pitch bend range set to 12, and on that synth I've also got my pitch bend range set to 12 as well. So what I can do now is basically like sing or hum a melody and bend it around that with that backing track. And you'll hear, even though my voice is not good at all, or just with humming, I can get quite cool little bendy melodies and lines around that. So let's have a play around and see how it comes out. Bring Dubler up again. So there's fun little ideas in there. So what you're hearing there as well is that I can keep holding a note and keep bending because I'm in the full octave as well. So if I want, I can just keep a note going round. My voice is not very cut out for that. But as well as still doing these long held notes, you can still do shorter staccato notes. So I can still do the melodies like da 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 da, but just bend away from it occasionally. I lost it towards the end. So that just shows you can still do kind of short staccato notes, but use Pitchbend to just occasionally vary from it, have a little play around, and add a little nice, like, kind of groovy bendy. I always like it because it makes me think of those, like, it was a really common thing with, like, 70s, like funk and some, like, jazzy stuff. Like, you know, when like mono synths really had their moment, and you get these like little lead lines with like crazy like pitch bend on them, which I always really like. So that is, yeah, I guess one little way that you can just add a little pitch bend and add some variation in a track. But so how does that actually look though when we record that? So what's going on? We're doing this in real time, and this is going into MIDI information. But how do we sort of record that, and what does it look like, and how can we edit it? So Pitchbend is actually slightly different, and you won't see it as different notes on a MIDI piano roll. So you'll just see the first note that you hit, and the pitch bend is actually recorded as CC information, which is different. Actually, I'm not sure if pitch bend is technically, I think it is CC information. So pitch bend will just be separate automation that you can control. So let's record something in with that line that we were doing and see how it looks. Cool. So here are the notes we're playing, but if you listen back, you'll hear the pitch bend with it, but you won't see that going on. Cool. So that's just the notes, but to see the actual pitch bend information, we need to go and find that in the automation. So again, this is different for every DAW. But there'll be an automation view or a clip view that allows you to look at these things. And what we want to go is to MIDI control, and then pitch bend is recording some of the other things as well. So we've got the CC dials and Dubler that are recorded in here, this expression control. But what we want is the pitch bend, which is at the top. And this information here is all pitch bend data. So now if we look at these notes, we'll actually see where these bends are happening, where they stop and start. This little melody is cracking me up, but you can hear, so like that's the ooh is going on here. So this is where you can record it and also edit it. You'll notice that there's loads of automation points. Some DAWs have this feature, some don't, but I can go simplify envelope here, and now I've just got a few points that are actually a lot more easier to deal with. So if we listen to this back, if we wanted to edit this, maybe we actually want this to come down and only go up a certain amount. Maybe we want to go even higher. You can edit, do whatever you want with it. So that's a bit crazy. But yeah, so it's important to just remember the pitch bend. It's giving me like, it's like a sort of like game, like Nintendo thing, like a Mario theme or something. So it's just important to remember that pitch bend is different to just the MIDI notes that are being recorded in. You'll see it in automation, and you can edit it after that. So if you do record with pitch bend, you might just see a note or some different ones, but to actually edit, yeah, you want to go to a different point. So cool, that's just pitch bend with some single notes and stuff. But let's also have a look at pitch bend with chords. So chords in Dubler, as you know, you can basically, let's put these on the same MIDI channel first. So Dubler can also output chords as well as single notes. So if I have the chord function on, let's just turn Pitchbend off for this little bit, and we'll put this on channel. And basically on that same synth, I'm now outputting chords with Dubler to the same one. Ba, ba, ba. Let's change the key actually. Let's do, and we'll add more notes in E minor. Ba, 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 ba. So you see we're putting all the chords in now. And Pitchbend can apply to chords as well as single notes, or you can do them separately. And what this allows you to do is actually create some quite complex things all just with the voice in one live take. So Dubler allows you to split the MIDI channels that single notes and chords are sent out on. So in the Assign tab, you'll see MIDI output channels. We've got triggers, pitch, and chords. If I put chords onto channel 2 and keep the pitch on channel 1, so this is on MIDI channel 1. So this channel is going to just take the single notes, ba, 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 ba. And then I've got some chords on this channel, or well, they're going to MIDI channel 2, taking information from MIDI channel 2, which means they're just only going to take the chords in and not the single notes. Ba, ba, ba. It's got a bit of a decay on that. So if I move that away. And in chords, you can also see what chords are going on. So I've just got a triads preset going on. So if I hit a C, it's going to put a C major, D, D major. You can change these, you can mess around with them. But what we're also going to look at is the voicing section here. So the voicing section of the chords basically is about how the chord is played. So voicing, cluster, or spread means how grouped the individual notes that make up that chord are. So if it's clustered, they'll be closer together. If it's spread, it'll be spread across a wider octave range. Root note baseline on or off basically means whether you want the root note that you're singing to be in that chord, and follow means whether it follows the octave of your voice, or shift allows you to put it into a separate amount. So ba, ba. Let's lower the octave of that chord a bit. Ba, 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 ba. Cool. So we've got chords going into this one and Pitchbend going into this one. But if we put Pitchbend on, you'll see there's also chords bend. So if I have chords bend on, that means the pitch of the chords and the single note are going to go at the same time. But if I have that off, this means I'm only going to bend the single note while the chord is going to stay at the same pitch. So that means that when I start a note, I'm going to get a chord. So if I sang a C, I'm going to get a C major. And even when I start bending away, it's going to stay on the C major. So I basically create my own backing track with a top line melody all in one take. And then if I stop and start and hit a new note, I'm going to get a new chord and I can start bending. So we'll keep this pitch bend range on 12. Ba. 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 Let's put the chords down a little bit in volume and the synth up so you can hear it a bit clearer. But if you can hear that, basically what you're hearing is I'm creating a backing track with a chord in the key and scale and this single note melody to bend around that. Ba, ba, So to trigger a new chord, all I need to do is stop singing these held notes and start a new one. So ba, 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 ba. But if I hold a note, I'm just going to keep that chord and latch. Well, I call it latch because a lot of these things, but I'm basically just holding it with the sustain of my voice, but still varying from it. So that's a cool way to just like layer up some different tunes. So We're hearing it there also in move the mic away while I'm talking. So we're hearing it there in the context of just this like top line and backing chords, which is, I guess, quite a common and natural way to think about it. But there's also other ways that you can do the same thing. I quite also like using Pitchbend with this kind of chord function to layer up some atmospheric chords and do some lower bass lines that are gliding around. So as well as, let's swap this around a bit. So we've got this bass patch on a single note. So this is taking information from MIDI channel 1, so that means it's only going to do the single notes. If I put this down to -1, I can now bend with this bass. So I've got a kind of like 80s kind of bass sound there that's bending around. And this time, instead of having like overlapping chords with the top line melody, I'm going to swap it around where I'm going to have the chords but higher up and use this bass line to glide around. So with the chords, let's have a look how they sound. So they're quite like ambient, but I want them to be a bit higher up. If I don't mess around with the wheel on my mouse. Cool. So I've got some overlapping chords, and now I can use the bass, and I'm just doing the flip of what it was going on before, whereas this should sound, this kind of create like an 80s synthy, very much like kind of sound, but I can bend the bass with the chords that are going at the top. Let me turn the chords down a bit so you can really hear the bass. I'll put that back on. That's a bit too quiet. So this is basically just a really fun way to create more complex kind of melodic ideas with like layering chords and that bendy line on top as well. So you can bend and get these high kind of synthy solo 70s style stuff. You can get the more of the bassy things. What you can do with Pitchbend is quite big. So yeah, there are a couple of ways of how you can use that. You can go a step further as well, as always. You can automate things as well. So with Pitchbend, that's a certain type of automation. We can also use the control dials in Dubler. So with that patch, with these couple tracks we were just using there, we could also explore maybe changing the filter cutoff of the synth as well. So you can do everything all in real time. I'm keeping an eye on the chat as well if you do have any questions. Like I mentioned, if you've joined and you weren't from the beginning of the stream, we're just taking a look at Pitchbend at the moment and chatting about it. But if you want to see something else, or it doesn't even have to be related to Pitchbend, let us know and we can sort of have a little play around. I feel like I've waffled on quite a bit already, so it could be good to move topic. Let's take a look at that bass and what pads we're using. One thing I didn't mention as well is that what's really key to this kind of compositional method is the key locks within Dubler. So you see I'm in E minor there. All I'm doing with no mic is just kind of going like which obviously doesn't sound great, but I'm using the key lock here, and there's a bit of, you don't need to know theory, but just to explain, because I'm in E minor, when I hit a note, I'm going to get a chord that's within the scale, so the notes that make up that are going to be in E minor. So I'm in the current key E minor, C major, D major, E minor, F sharp diminished, G major, so on. So when I hit that note, even when I bend a bit, even when I bend around, it's smoothing it out, it's always going to sound in key. So even when I'm going, I'm getting just that rough idea, but I'm hearing it in a nice, more melodic kind of structure. So yeah, something to bear in mind, that you can then play around with the sounds a bit via the key. So you can either just select some random ones and see how that sounds. So that was E minor. Let's try something a bit weirder. Let's D harmonic minor. Let's turn the bass down. See how this sounds. So the single notes sound quite weird against those harmonic minors. Phrygian, let's have a play around with that, see how that sounds. G Phrygian. So we're getting some crazy chords as well. Dave was saying, I missed a bit at the beginning. Did you manually map pitch bend to a control? So no, so pitch bend is just on. You can turn it on and off in Dubler with this thing here, and then outside of that is then dependent on the plugin you're using. Some of them, most plugins, pitch bend is on by default, but it's only activated if you use the wheel or if pitch bend was on in Dubler. So all you need to do is find where the pitch bend is and then make sure it's mapped. So like I said, in an operator here, pitch bend range is set here. I would just need to make sure it's the same. Some of them you need to put them on, or they'll be on 0 by default. But yeah, it depends on the plugin. But no mapping is required. Once you pitch bend on, all that matters is the range. Aside from that, it's good to go. This is because on keyboards, like I said, it's separate. You don't ever normally do pitch bend unless you put it on a wheel or on some MPE since you maybe you've enabled it to a certain expression. But yeah, no mapping is required. Devin was saying, can you touch on automating the control knobs in Ableton? Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, what I was saying before, let's have a look at, let's use the same patch and let's control a filter on here. So that sounds quite nice and smooth. Say we want to control that with a dial in this patch. So I've done this quite a lot in the streams, but I was having a discussion with someone recently about how to move the dials, and I think that's something we can touch on as well to show or explain this a bit better. So how the control dials are mapped in any DAW is through MIDI mapping, which is a process that varies from DAW to DAW. But in Ableton, there's like a MIDI map mode. So if I go into MIDI map mode now, I can select the parameter that I want to control. So there's filter frequency, and then in the assign tab, I can click map here next to that the vowel that I want to use. So I use an R vowel. So I hit map. You see in the bottom left here now this is linked. It says 20. This is CC20. So they're now linked, and if I turn off MIDI map mode, basically this is now linked to the R vowel. So great, this is now linked to an R vowel, but how do I then also control that, and what does it mean to raise it with a vowel? This is something that I often brush past and it's something that you should get a feel with once you start using it. But the vowels are raised based on how true you are to that specific vowel, if that makes sense. So if it's a pure R sound, that knob should be to the top, to the max. If it's blended with an E or an U, then those knobs will raise and the R will go down. So if it's just an R, that'll be the same. If there's no R, then that'll be at the bottom. So a way, if I want to raise the filter, is to pick a starting point that isn't an R vowel. So singing with an E or an U, for example, and then if I want to raise it, I introduce an R vowel. So pick two sounds maybe, if you've got one parameter mapped to a vowel. Start with one, and then when you want to introduce your filter or your mappable thing that you've chosen, then just introduce that R vowel. So if I start with an E and then go to an R, that's how I'm going to raise the filter on here. E, 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 So yeah, I'm starting with an E, I'm going to the R. So that's how I'm kind of controlling that. In the Assign tab as well, just when I was talking about range, you may have seen that my R vowel is different for everyone, doesn't always reach the complete maximum. So if I'm going E, I can get it pretty close, but not all the way to the top. E, so I can lower the max here, so my R vowel can reach the full range. E, So yeah, that range make it more easy for me to go up and down. And this one on the right hand side, as well as that, so that's the range of the actual dial itself. This is the output. So this is, if you know about MIDI information, basically the CC information that's going out is between the numbers 0 and 127. This is quite boring if you don't really care about this, but say if the filter's halfway, that's the data that the number it's putting out for that would be 64 or whatever. So this is basically means the minimum or maximum of the filter. So you can think of these just like the top and bottom of this dial as well. So although I can fit the range of my input, maybe I don't want the output to ever go below a certain amount, or maybe I want it to never go above a certain amount. So if I bring this down, this means it's going to stay pretty low. Yeah, so that's basically allowing me to fine tune it. So if you want to, if you keep getting that vowel and it's like, oh, I don't want to keep hearing that, or you want to just have different parameters with different ranges, that's a good way. Also, if you're in Ableton, it's worth mentioning, you can do that in Dubler. You can also do that in Ableton. So you see, if you open up MIDI mappings here, when you're in MIDI map mode, you'll see all the mappings you have, and you'll see a minimum max. So this is applying to this, the filter, so you can set that here. But you're saying map multiple vowels at once to different parameters. Yeah, absolutely, you can do that. There's no limit to what you can map. I think this is when you'd use like your doors, what I just showed there, the automation to control different things. But yeah, we could have a look at maybe, or let's try it. Let's see what we want to do. Maybe we want the R, so we're going to keep the filter on that. Let's put this down a bit. How does the filter resonance sound? Yeah, so that's cool. So maybe I want the filter resonance to be high when it's low, so you get the like high resonance kind of like cut off sound, and then I want it to go down, so I just get a clean higher frequency. So I can also map that to CC20. So let's click the resonance. If you go into the Assign tab, you click map. This is now also linked, but this time I don't want them to follow the same thing. So right now, if I use that, the resonance and the frequency are going to go up at the same time. You can see they're doing the same thing. If I want to reverse that, I can go to the filter resonance, put the min all the way to the top, the max all the way down, so it's basically reversed. So now what that means is that when this is up, this will be down and vice versa. And I'm still just using this with the R vowel. So I'm getting those kind of resonant lower sounds. So I'm doing different things with the same dial, and you can reverse them, you can map to different things. Yeah. And that's not just on one thing either. So that's on the chord. Maybe we want to control this bended bass that we were using earlier as well. What could we put? Let's add an audio effect that we'd maybe want to add in when that filter raises. So maybe we want to add some sparkles. Why not? Let's add some crystals maybe. No, actually, not crystals. Let's do distortion, so we can distort that bass even further when we raise our vowel. Decapitator, that's what we want. This might sound a bit bad, but let's see. So you get that really blown out, distorted sound when that tone is up, which I believe in Ableton is mapped to mix. Here it is, mix. Oh, that's the mix here. The drive actually was the one at the top. So let's keep drive here and then mix down. Yeah, so we're getting a kind of blown out speaker sound. So let's map the mix to the same R, and let's add so I've got 3 parameters there, all changing. So I've got an audio effect, I've got the parameters on the synth itself moving. Let's also map let's go one step further and just show how much you can do. Let's add tremolo on those all together and see where we get to. So if I only want this to introduce with a vowel as well, let's put this depth. We're going to put this to the R as well. So we've got all these going. I don't know what this is going to sound like, but now if I go from an E to an R, so my E is my starting resting point with everything at 0, I should get this kind of the low resonant filtered sound, and then up we're going to get rhythms, some distortion, and cleaner tones from the synth. I don't know why we're definitely in like 80s synth world at the moment here with these sorts of sounds, but this obviously applies to anything. You get to hear it. So a bit of deviation from Pitchbend there, but yeah, that's you can link those to different. Oh, you said multiple vowels as well at once to different parameters. Yes, I was doing all of those on one vowel. If I wanted, you can change those. You can change them anyway as well. Within here, so you could just remap, but you can add different ones. So let's change that tremolo and this one to different sounds. If you're interested in vowels as well, I touched on this quite a lot in our last live stream of sound design, so if you want to go back, there's me sort of exploring sound design with the control dials, which play a heavy part in that. So you'll see lots of sort of ideas in there as well with MIDI mapping. I wonder what's... No, I'm not even going to try and make that fit, that 80s link. We can remap these. Let's do the mix to E. Let's do this depth to U, and let's do resonance to envelope, which is intensity. So it's quite cool. So now I've got 3 kind of different areas. I've got my oohs, which is my rhythmic low down ooh. I've got the rhythm and the filters down. My E is the clean but blown out sound with the bass. E. My filter's all the way down so the pad almost disappears. And then my R is a bit of a blend of those with the filter up. I quite like that blown out E. Let's raise the output on that even more, so we can just get go into an E and really get everything distorted. E, That's quite fun. Back to pitch bend, you can actually hear I'm still pitch bending that as well with these chords. So if you have joined, basically what you're seeing or going on there with my single notes, the bend, these chords are going to the pad, and then these are controlling all the effects around it. We can go back to a cleanup. There you go. So that was quite fun. Back to that actual pitch bend. So yeah, I guess that is. We spent that last half more looking at control arts, but that first half, yeah, is something. I hope there's some ideas in there in using pitch bend. It's something that's a really underused part of Dubler, but I think is such a core part of, like, with your voice, your ideas naturally have this bend and glide. Pitch bend wheels on keyboards do a job with this, but they're just a set range. You're just moving it up or down. The voice is, in my opinion, the best way to express pitch bend with MIDI. So I'd really recommend giving it a go and using it, and also not just thinking of it as like I've just got pitch bend on and just going ooh, trying those single notes like so have a practice of blending it with the percussive onsets and then bending around from it and finding something that suits your melody within the key lock you're in. So yeah, single notes, and then also layering up chords on different output channels on the MIDI, getting a couple channels going at the same time, and yeah, having a go with pitch bend. But we're coming. They've just got a message. Not pitch related. If I use Dubler on multiple Ableton tracks for a live loop setup, having mouse map params on each track that will modulate inactive tracks, is there a solution / workaround? Having vowels mapped to parameters on each track that will modulate inactive tracks. Well, what do you mean by this? I'm trying to make sure I've got the right end of the stick here. So if you use Dubler on multiple Ableton tracks for live looping, and you have vowels mapped to parameters on each track that will modulate inactive tracks. So as in, like, do you want them to not modulate inactive tracks? Do you want them to turn off completely, or you want to always keep everything modulated? So this is kind of more of a thing with MIDI mapping in general. So if you map a dial in MIDI map mode in Ableton. It's completely separate. Oh, if I map to a filter on each track, but I only want to target the active track. Yeah, so this, unfortunately, this is not an easy thing. This is the same as if you had like a bunch of control dials or a knob controlling it. When the link is kind of made in MIDI map between a parameter, it's always going to be sending that information, even if a track is inactive. That link is made basically. So you can turn a specific dial off in Dubler. So if you hit the button on each one here, you'll see they're inactive and they're grayed out. So they won't move, but I know that isn't a solution if you, because there's only 3 dials here, so that's not a solution if you, or what you could do actually, I'm just trying to think of workarounds. What you could do maybe is use one vowel, but have it different ones mapped to different CC numbers, and then flick between. This isn't ideal actually, because you would have to do this physically in Dubler. But in theory, say I have all those 3 parameters mapped to an R vowel, I could have one on CC 23, one on 24, and one on 25. So to keep using that same vowel but doing an active one, I could change this. So if it was on 23, I know my R vowel is a filter. If it's on 24, I know my R vowel is now a different loop. If it's on 25, I know that my R vowel. So that is a way to kind of change the same dial for different things and make sure they don't move. Right now, I know that's not a particularly nice solution because you have to go into the Assign tab and actually click these different things. You could save different profiles that have that CC thing, so you could switch between them up here. Switch between them like that is kind of the quickest way maybe to go between ones. Or there might be something smart you could do in Ableton to switch the active CC, what it's receiving from as well. It's an interesting question. I think off the top of my head, that's probably one thing you could do, but maybe there's some Ableton folks who would have better ideas as well. I'll check back on this video if anyone watches. But I'll have a think about it and play around. If I do think of any, I'll stick it on the forums. If you're on our forums, forum.voxlia.com or .co.uk actually. But I'll have a play around and see. I built a Max plugin to dispatch MIDI messages, but it's introducing latency. I'll keep working on it. Yeah, that's a good one. It shouldn't, in theory, add latency. But yeah, keep us. I mean, what we could do from a development side, Dubler at the moment is focused on kind of studio use, and there's a lot of live applications, especially if you're in live looping, that it could be used in. That we could definitely add features for. So we'll do some feature requests, but like certain mappings or automations or changes that you could do it within Dubler. So this would be solved if you could MIDI map in Dubler, because then you could automate the Dubler like settings as well as Ableton. So you can have a really flexible solution there where you can flip around all sorts of different CC groupings. But it's an interesting one. I'll have a play around. But yeah, so I think that's mostly it. We're coming up to an hour now. So that is a brief look at Pitchbend, a brief look at playing around with control dials, and a nice little chat about mappings, which I always enjoy. So the next live stream is going to be Icon doing it, I believe, and I think it is on. What is the next live stream on, actually? Let me have a look. I believe the next live stream is on sampling with Dubler 2. I actually don't know about Icon on that, what that'll be exploring specifically, but yeah. So monthly live stream will be happening again next month. As always, forums, please do join us on the forums, forum.voxlia.co.uk. Let me check it is .co.uk before I say that. I should really know this as community manager. Yeah, .co.uk. You can create an account on there. We're always available to chat. If you have ideas that you want to see on future live streams, let us know. We've got some interesting videos coming up soon. And if you yourself are a Dubler user and have some cool ideas, yeah, please let us know as well. There's always new things, like Dave was just saying, this thing about ways you could have a go live looping setups and ways you could use the control dials and that stuff we don't think about. So please do let us know, because we'd love to hear it and test it further, and that can come up with new feature ideas that get implemented as well. So yeah, thanks very much for joining, and we'll see you on the next live stream. All right, cheers.